Good evening, everybody. This is the Planning Board meeting of March 5th, 2024. First item on the agenda is the introduction of the Planning Board members. To my left, Peter Goodwin. Sitting next to Peter is Roger Murray. Then Doug Braskin, who is the Vice Chairman of the Planning Board. To my right, Jane Nielsen, who's an alternate. Next to Jane is Brad Harriman, who is the representative from the Board of Selectmen. And then Julie Jacobs, who is also an alternate. And my name is Kathy Barnard. First item on the agenda is a public hearing, and this is for the Pine Hill Storage Realty LLC, 18 Pine Hill Road, tax map 190-20, case 2024-01. This is a site plan review for the construction of two 50 by 50 structures with 2 contractor units per building. Okay, just a second. There are some things that I think would be important if you folks can focus on. Want to know how the stormwater runoff is going to be dealt with. The business services, if you can define that a little more specifically.
The uses, is that what you just said? I'm having a hard time hearing in here for some reason.
Really? Oh, okay.
Just the fan and stuff.
Okay, all right, sorry. Yes, business services, and that's, no, that's pretty much it, if you could focus on those things, in addition to what you were going to tell us.
Okay. So Scott Franco is from New Hampshire Land Consultants. With me tonight is Chris Pongratz, the owner of the property.
Is the microphone on?
Yes.
It is? Or just bring it closer to you.
You just got to eat it.
So Scott Frankowitz from New Hampshire Land Consultants. With me is Chris Pongratz, the owner of the property and Pine Hill Storage. So the existing conditions on this property, as you probably know, is tax map 190, lot 20 at 18 Pine Hill Road. The lot size is 2.63 acres, and it's in the Bay Street Limited Business District. Currently on the property, on this specific property, as there's 3 properties out there, there's 4 storage buildings, 1 single-family home and a garage, and an office building. The current impervious is about 47%, and it's part of a larger storage complex out there, which is on lot 24. There's 2 buildings, and then lot 25, there's another 5. So what we're proposing are the 2 orange squares, in addition to the 4 buildings, the house and the office on this property. We are adding a little bit of pavement in front of the units, and adding a total impervious of about 10,000 square feet with the 2 buildings and the pavement. There are 2 existing detention ponds that we'll be modifying. Currently, for the one to the left, there's a pond there that's going to be expanded and pushed back a little bit with a discharge going out and around to the backside of this building, where there's an infiltration trench along that backside of that building. And then on the one that's closer to the road, there is an existing, and it must have been approved on one of the original site plans, a small little infiltration area, and we're expanding that. And it'll discharge out here and run down and swale behind this building.
I'm sorry to interrupt. If you could pull the mic out of the holder, you can just hold it up to you so when you step over to the plans, you can be heard.
So this detention pond, there's a little swale here, and that's going to discharge into a swale behind this building, which goes to a larger pond that was designed and approved at an earlier site plan. There is no changes to the pattern of the traffic on the site. It's accessed here on Pine Hill and then up here further on Land Bank Lane, and they're all connected.
There's
So
also-
with these changes, the impervious,
Just a second, there is an existing detention pond down at the corner. Right.
there's an existing detention pond
down,
right here.
Right down at the, yes.
Yeah, there's a little.
Does that
That was
function?
from like way back when the,
But is that functioning? Oh, okay.
But that's going to remain, is that correct?
Okay, go ahead.
okay, and the last thing I got is just the amount of impervious. We're proposing 55.9% where 60 is allowed on this site. And if you wanted to talk about the,
You need the microphone.
So what we're
Okay,
proposing
can
is...
you
is-
identify yourself, please?
I apologize. My name is Chris Pongratz, and I am the owner of the lot of record that we're speaking
Okay,
of.
thank you.
So as I'm sure the board knows, that the site is principally storage, but these buildings will be very different than the buildings. They are not storage buildings. They are intended for the use as business services as is defined in the bylaw, and they will be principally businesses that provide services via contract or otherwise to other businesses.
Anything else you want to?
I think with that, we'll open it up.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. Okay, planning board members, questions?
I see some, a reasonably, in the previous situation, there was a reasonably large pond there, and now it looks like the infiltration area is a whole lot smaller on the left side. And yes.
Microphone.
And, I just wonder whether this is compensating. You're creating more impervious surface with your roofs, but you seem to be decreasing the area of the infiltration area.
And the way I understand, Bernie Temple is a professional engineer that designed the drainage on it, and he told me it's an enlarged pond. It's not smaller than the existing pond that's out there.
Microphone.
Sorry, Scott. It also goes on both sides of the building, whereas previously, and still retains in the back of the building, whereas previously it didn't include this section there.
I have a question. I was reading these, and it says that each building will have 2 offices and 1 bathroom. Does it say 2 bathrooms because it's 2 units?
So currently, the spaces aren't leased to any specific tenant. So what we're proposing is each of the buildings will have 2 units. However, depending on who may rent the unit, it could be that just a single tenant in a building, depending on how much space they need. So if how we would like them to be formatted would be 2 restrooms in each building, 2 offices in each building, and 2 kind of shop flex areas in each building. However, that could all be scaled to just 1 of each if that's what the tenant prefers, if they want to take the whole building. Actually, I think I'm sorry, I misstated there. It would still have 2 restrooms, because that would be in the future if we
Smart
went.
idea.
Yeah, if in the future if we had a different tenant, okay, we want to have that flexibility. The office and petition would be relatively easy to create.
Can you describe a little more what type of people are going to be renting these places? I mean, what type of business?
I'm a little reluctant to go into too many hypotheticals, okay, because I really don't
I'm not
know.
asking for hypotheticals. I was just wondering what your
Yeah, so
plan
businesses
was.
that serve other businesses. I don't know, how to, that principally do that. I am, and I don't mean to be evasive about the question, but I've read the bylaw. I don't have anything particularly, secured, if you will. And I think the bylaw is pretty clear, speaks for itself, includes a definition. It'll be certainly reviewed by, the building inspector, any tenant that goes in there to make sure that they're compliant with what's the allowed use. And should there be, any concern with that or difference of opinion, I'll be back here before you.
Is this office space, or is it?
It will include an office space.
So the application calls out business service, which, I mean, I can read the definition if the board would like it, but it's basically what Chris is saying, businesses that support other businesses. So it could be office equipment repair and servicing. It could be building maintenance. It could be commercial research. It could be labs and testing. I mean, it could be any number of things. So the parking that was discussed in the memo is premised on a small office area and some amount of storage or ancillary support for whatever that business is. The buildings all propose a vehicle access door. So if you can picture Johnny business owner or Sally business owner with a pickup truck pulls in, has a small office, does their accounting, meets with the occasional client, that's what the parking is based on. So what is envisioned, if the board were to approve the site plan, is that any occupant would have to go through a change of occupancy with the building department, would need a floor plan of the particular area. Again, as Chris said, whether it's the full 5,000 or 2,500 square feet. And it would be discussed, what is going on in this building? And if the determination was made that it wasn't business services, it was something else under the ordinance, they may need to come back and provide additional parking or other, depending on what the use is.
Are there restrictions on hazardous waste, hazardous substances in these areas?
Only on the building code. Zoning doesn't get into that.
Okay, so if the building code would ever cover those issues.
Can you speak to the daily traffic you expect?
We expect minimal daily traffic. These are intended for small businesses that may have a couple of employees. So, you know, and they're not intended for customers to visit or be retail or anything like that. So it's not to say a customer wouldn't visit, but it would certainly be like by an appointment only type thing. So it would be limited to the business owner, whatever few employees he might have, and that occasional customer that may visit, you know, with an appointment to see them.
And do you expect to have any signage on the main road identifying the businesses that are in these structures?
We're not asking for any signage, don't anticipate any signage. I certainly don't want to close the door on that issue, but if we would like signage, then of course that's another conversation that whether it goes through building department or back to this board, whatever's the appropriate thing, we'll do it at that time. But tonight we're not proposing any signage.
Tavis, could you just describe the history of this, the storage buildings and that type of thing?
I don't know all of the history, but at one point there were some storage buildings that were approved. It then became Bay Street Limited Business District. Storage is not a permitted use. They did receive a special exception a few years ago for a 25% expansion. And right now the site is being controlled by lot coverage and parking.
Thank you. Go ahead, Roger.
Going back to the parking, under the parking regulations in the zoning ordinance, one space for every 250 feet of gross floor area is required for business services. And you seem to be proposing 5 and 6 spaces for the 2 buildings, which would not meet that requirement.
So I find myself a little embarrassed because I missed that. Okay, but be that as it may, we certainly have the lot coverage available that we could add more parking spaces. But my anticipated use here, as I said earlier, would certainly not require it. And certainly my experience with the storage facilities use of parking is that we are well overparked. Perhaps not by the definition, but all of the years of experience we have there's never an occasion where the parking spots are anywhere near full on the site. But you know, if it pleases the board, we could add more spaces.
Well, I'm not sure whether you have any excess spaces in your storage unit, but we really have no authority to waive parking requirements under the zoning ordinance. So I certainly would like to see 10 spaces for each building.
Do the parking spaces need to be exactly at the front door of the building?
Not necessarily.
Because there are lined spaces pretty close to the fronts of the buildings.
Well, you need to have spaces for the storage of
So
private.
there's 21 storage spaces. Apparently, yeah, Scott was on top of it, as he usually is. Sorry.
Tavis, do you know how many are needed for the storage buildings?
Storage units require one space per 20 stalls.
The 21 number that I cited is not the total, it's the addition with this proposed change. So I guess what I'm saying is it does meet the 10 per building
Counting the storage?
not counting the storage spaces. So the storage spaces are their own thing, but what we're proposing tonight, the two business services buildings, as you point out, require 10 parking spaces each for a total of 20, and we're showing adding 21.
22.
But you also have, you've
No,
got,
I said that wrong again. Sorry. So how many are we adding new?
6, 11, 17.
6, 7, 8. I'm sorry. So the correct number is 13 new. 13 new. But we could add the 3 more. Again, if that's something that's required, we're happy to put the 3 additional spaces in.
I think you do need 10 for each of the new
Okay,
proposed
so a total
buildings.
of 20 new ones.
Yes.
Correct, okay. Sorry about the confusion there.
In that area, there are 23 spaces, if you count the ones which are, what?
Yeah, I believe some of those are committed to the storage buildings.
Okay.
Correct.
And also the office. And there being 2 required for the house, but presumably they're,
How many storage units are currently on the building right now?
I didn't anticipate that question tonight.
Roughly how many per building?
It would be under 200 total units that are there. I don't know exactly how many under, but that would mean 10, just kind of doing the rough math,
So you need 30 total.
so that we'd need 30 total. What do we have total?
does that include the office parking?
And apparently we have 25, not including the 2 by the office. If you include the 2 by the office, that would be 27 that we have. This facility is by and large an automated facility, so there's nobody in the office on a regular basis. We meet clients there that require it, but what I'm saying is the 2 parking spaces by the office are generally empty.
But you do need to meet the requirements.
Understood.
Could you go over this storm drainage again? Because it looks to me like it's less.
No,
I mean,
we can confirm those numbers with the drainage report, but
It does meet.
Yeah, I know, but he can explain it
the
also.
original pond, we did have a little bit here, and it came here and just came back around. We've expanded it up this side. So generally, this would be about the same as what's there right now. And then we expanded this up to catch any runoff going that way and this way. So all this area is an expanded area. And on this side, it was just a little strip here behind the building, which is substantially different and sends the water down there.
Just as, to the extent that it's relevant, is the 2 properties that are down gradient from here are properties that I also own and manage. And if there were, in the unlikely event, 'cause I don't think it would happen, any overflow of what's here, it would spill onto my property and be picked up by other stormwater mitigation systems that we have recently constructed that, despite some tremendous water that we've received in recent years or months, have never experienced any type of a stormwater management problem.
Tavis, has this drainage report been reviewed by any of the staff people?
It was reviewed by staff, yes. Did not go out for third party.
And does that address the removal of total suspended solids,
Yes.
nitrogen, 80% total suspended, and
Yes.
50% nitrogen and phosphorus? I have one other question, and that's what about snow storage? I gather that may be on some other plan, but I couldn't find it on these.
I think Tavis kind of touched on that on the original snow storage, of course, in the ponds. And then there's snow storage availability along the sides here and all of this area, all of that area, that area. There's a substantial amount of area to store snow. And you can probably speak to it better, seeing you managed it for.
Yes, we've had no issues with snow storage on the site. ZR Landscaping does our snow removal there. His mission is that when it comes to snow removal, the site is entirely cleared of all snow. The paved areas right up to the building. Every door is shoveled. There's no snow piles left anywhere near, against, or on top of a building or the access to it. And he always, has no trouble putting the snow in storage areas around in various places to meet that. We don't anticipate that this change will impact that. He just does a great job with it. I think it was last April we got, and I hate to bring this up being mid-March here, but we got like 40 inches of snow last April, and there was no issue in storing snow.
Brad, did you have any thoughts on this?
So on the stormwater part, yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah, I've been looking it over. It seems adequate to me. It seems like it's going to work. Obviously, didn't see the report there or anything, but sounds like they've taken the stormwater management requirements that we have into consideration during the development of it. And according to what Tavis has said, that they meet the requirements for filtering out the nutrients that we require there. So. His explanation of the replacement around in 4 Bay 1A and 4 Bay number 1 appears to more than adequately account for the loss of the detention pond there where the building is going to be built. The grades and everything in there seem to work as far as I can see in the absorption and the design they have for the for the infiltration look good, so I'm good with it.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions?
I have one other question, that is, on this elevation, you show a door on the side. Is the other unit going to have a similar door?
Correct, yes. It will be a mirror image of that one. And there is no rear elevation in the building, but there'll also be a pedestrian door on the two rear corners of the building as well, just for rear egress. They're just emergency type usage.
Okay, somebody want to accept this application as complete, make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the application as complete.
I'll second it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I'll open the, well, wait a minute, now we have to accept this. We can open the public hearing. Okay, I'll open the public hearing now. Any member of the public that wants to comment on this, please come on up. Tell us who you are.
So this is not the conceptual.
Name?
Suzanne Ryan. This is the formal submittal.
Yes.
And so I think you need to be very specific in what you require of this site, given that I'm trying to think of what it is. Light construction is allowed in that zone, and so I don't know what the what the dimensions are of the building other than 50 by 50, but I don't know the height of those doors. So I'm concerned that there may be heavy equipment going in and out of there or stored. And because the applicant chose to be so vague as to what the storage types would be just now in his presentation, I would be careful of what it is. And the other thing is, I know you've probably already done it with your previous approvals of this area for hours of operation and lighting. And, but again, I'd be concerned about traffic circulation. I mean, that's really, it's growing a lot in there, and I can foresee future issues with traffic circulation and entering out onto the Pine Hill Road. But I would like to see a little more information about what actually is going to be stored there.
Okay.
Not who,
Right.
but what.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the question. So to be clear, we're not proposing a storage use. I mean, these are not storage buildings. There's nothing that will be stored outside at all. And to the extent that there is any storage inside of the building, it's only incidental to the use of the business services type use that we're proposing. So there's nothing. There's nothing that's going to be stored on the outside of the site that'll be visible. It's not a storage building. It's a building specifically for business services. As so far as traffic is concerned, we do also have we simply do not have a traffic management issue there. On a busy Saturday, 2 or 3 people may show up throughout the course of a day. But the added benefit too is that we do have an egress through the adjoining lot that we own out to Land Bank Lane, which really makes any traffic thing just a very easy proposition and a safe proposition to get in and out of.
Yeah, well, and I think that we did deal with that traffic flow when we first looked at this.
We did discuss it before, yes.
Yeah, right. So,
I'm sorry, but the agenda says structure with 2 contractors' units per building. I don't think that's been described for someone that's just dropped in on it. I haven't seen the plans. What is that?
Suzanne, to answer your earlier question, the description that we got along with the application says that the buildings will be, 29 feet high at the apex of the gable and 16 feet tall at the eaves. And I would guess, looking at the plan, that the height of the doors the garage doors is 10 to 12 feet.
As shown in the plan, it's 12 feet by 12 feet doors.
okay, so can you be more specific, which is,
Again, I don't want to get into hypotheticals, but the one use that I'm sorry, Suzanne had mentioned for heavy equipment, there's no intended heavy equipment use whatsoever here. We can make that a stipulation that.
Let me try phrasing it this way. Under the definition, business services are establishments primarily engaged in rendering services to business establishments on a fee or contract basis, such as advertising, mailing, building maintenance, employment service, management and consulting services, protective services, office equipment, rental and leasing, commercial research, development and testing, photo finishing, and personal supply services. Which of those fit what you're proposing?
So I believe that the qualifier there is such as. I mean, it goes in and kind of lists sort of what seems to be a bunch of random businesses, but what I think that I'd like to leave it at is, it's as the bylaw defines business services. These are businesses that service other businesses. And as I had said earlier, they will be looking for a certificate of use from the building department, okay, that, we'll sit in judgment that is compliant.
We're trying to resolve zoning issues, and so we understand that you have to get a permit, but...
Right.
But when you have a tenant, they'll qualify under one of these listed things.
The intent is that language will be in their lease.
We're not looking at anybody going into the units now, aren't we? Just looking at the spot where the building is going now, with no building on it yet? Isn't that what we're looking at?
Yeah, certainly we're not.
Ask the applicant.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just a little
Yeah,
confused
well,
now as to why we're asking
but
who your
we're in
renters
the
are going to
public
be.
hearing, you could
Like,
ask him.
that's not really something we need to look at right now, is it, is who
Yeah.
his tenants are going to be?
Well, he needs to
Yes, it
qualify.
is to make sure it meets the definition. That's what we're trying to get to.
The definition is just a building at this point, correct?
No, it's
No,
building services,
it's
which I
business
just read
services.
the definition of.
I do understand my responsibility that the businesses that operate there need to be compliant with the spirit and with the language of the bylaw.
To your point, if somebody wanted to open Hobby Lobby in one of those bays, the building department would say, no, that's not business services. You need to go back to the planning board to have the parking evaluated. And if they proposed a use that wasn't consistent with Bay Street Limited Business District, they would likely need to go to the zoning board for a variance for said use.
But that's up to the tenant, correct? That's not up to the building owner,
Well,
is what I'm
it's,
getting at.
the property owner would have to authorize it, but yes, it would likely be the tenant looking for that relief. In this particular case, the property owner is coming forward saying, I want up to 4 spaces with business services in it, and has suggested that the lease would stipulate business services in it. So it sounds like there's a double check valve, if you will. If somebody proposed something other than business services, they'd have to coordinate with Chris to modify the lease, and that would be dependent on town approval.
Right, but he's not just going to go out and look for retail gift shops to come in, because I would hope he would know better. Or
Yeah, I
somebody
think he said that
would
explicitly.
I can assure you that I do, okay, and that I won't.
Okay, anyone else from the public? Yeah.
I would just
go ahead.
add, if the planning board, I mean, it seems like there's a couple of options. Contrary to what was said, I believe the board could determine through a parking alternative that adequate parking is provided with this plan. The ordinance, quite frankly, is a bit in conflict. The property owner has suggested there's additional parking on the adjacent lot. If you look at 175, 136, you can't consider, the planning board can't consider off-street parking if it's in a different zone. But then the parking alternatives and parking management plan under 173, 20.2, which is part of site plan, says that you can look at adjacent lots under the same ownership. So my recollection of the adjoining lot is that it's over-parked, and that was at the design of the planning board. Whether it's over-parked enough to satisfy the 7 missing stalls in this particular case hasn't been shown tonight. The other alternative would be to have the applicant come back showing the 7 additional spaces on the site.
But you're saying because the property is owned by the same owner, it is not an issue?
I'm not saying it's not an issue. What I'm saying is the parking alternatives and parking management plans gives the authority to the planning board to consider off-site parking to solve such a situation. An alternative would be to simply show 7 more stalls on the site. Looking at the site plan, it's very easy to see where 7 additional stalls could go without increasing pavement. So I don't know personally if it's worth having them come back to show the board where the 7 are, or if the board would want to consider making it a condition that all 30 stalls be shown on the site.
I would like to see the spaces shown on the plan. I mean, it doesn't seem to be a problem, but I think we should see it and see them there, and so it is on the plan, and going forward, everybody knows. Now, it would also put you in a position where if you wanted to sell one of these lots, then you would not have to fiddle with your parking, and you wouldn't have to go through the alternative parking resolution and put that all together when you could just put them on this plan.
May we get an approval tonight that stipulates that we need to add those to the plan?
I would suggest the board would need you and/or Scott to show where on the site those 7 would fit, and then it would be up to the board to say if that's good enough, with the understanding that they be added to the plan for final approval.
Okay, could we have just a 2-minute recess?
That's up to them.
We only asked for 2 minutes.
For future discussion while they're looking at this, personal and business services, professional offices, and community service all require the 1 space for 250 gross floor area, plus 3 stacking spaces for the first drive-through lane. To me, the board may want to look at the parking requirement because business services aren't necessarily the same as professional offices or community services.
But they're all listed together in the ordinance.
I'm not saying with regard to this. This is just a pin for a future date to review. Because it's the same for retail sales and rental, and I think what was described tonight is substantively different from a retail operation. It's also the same for medical offices and banks, which are, to me, a very different customer clientele relationship than what's being proposed here.
Are we looking for 30 total? That would be 2 for each. I'm sorry, that would be 1 for each 20 plus 10 for each of the
Correct.
of the new buildings. So that we have here by the buildings 1 and 2. So 3 additional spaces in front of building 2 and 2 additional ones in front of building 1. Gives us 5 additional plus 1, which is probably a good place for it anyway, just on that small section of.
Does that meet the parking aisle requirements?
Yeah, those would be 10 feet wide. I believe it's 9 feet is the requirement.
No, the aisle in between the stalls.
In between the parking stalls?
Back of each stall is 20 feet apart?
Oh, yes, yeah, no, certainly, yep. Probably closer to 40.
You know, all this would have been avoided if you had put the parking on the site plan here, so we could look at it ahead of time.
I understand.
So what's the bottom line here?
So the bottom line is with the sketches we just made here, we can put 3 additional parking spaces in front of building 2, 2 additional parking spaces in front of building 1, and then, I'm sorry, those labels are reversed, but in front of buildings 1 and 2, we can put 5 additional spaces, plus 1 over right where that section of curb is. I don't know if you can see where Scott is pointing to.
So as amended, they're showing 30 stalls where 30 are required.
Oh, okay, but, all right, well, that's what we're saying here, but I think we really need to see this on our plans, so in the future, people know what they're looking at.
You're gonna need
So
to
an option
record
is
the
to have them
plan.
revise the plans for the board to have at a future meeting, or the board can look at this and understand that that would be a condition that those stalls be added to the final plan that would be signed. That's up to the board.
I would suggest we could look at what they have just done and see if it is appropriate. We might have to get up there and look at it, or they could bring it over so we could see it.
No,
Yeah.
no, we're supposed to have this information before us, okay? And that's what I'm concerned about, is that we don't have it. And, without counting, I don't think, when somebody is looking at a file, they need to say, oh, okay, here's the parking right here. And
Right,
is it adequate or is it not?
And I don't mean to be argumentative, okay, but the plan that we'll submit for signature will show the 30 spaces that are required. And so to the extent that it's missing 6 right now, we pointed out exactly where they're going to be. It's a very simple thing to understand, and we'll make that change, and that will be the final plan that we submit. And on a practical level, the property will be very much overparked. But if that's what's required for our approval tonight, then that's what we'll do.
Okay, no other public. Are you pretty much done?
Yes.
Tavis, why don't you tell us what conditions you have?
Could we do a walk-by here?
I beg your pardon?
A walk-by?
You want me to do a walk-by?
Yes.
With the plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
So recommended conditions are fairly straightforward, refers to the entire plan set as submitted. I would add to that as modified at the meeting this evening. Applicants responsible for payment of all recording fees for the notice of decision. Wait.
There's just one parking space there. So we have 3 there, 2 there, and then right now this curve comes around, it's only a curve, the edge of pavement keeps running loose back. So we'll eliminate that loop back with one addition there. So the addition of 2, 3, 1, we get 30. So in front of these 2 buildings, there's currently just one parking space here. So we're proposing adding 3 more there and 2 there. There's no parking spaces currently there. And then right here, the edge of pavement loops around and kind of doubles back here. So we're proposing eliminating that so that it'll just radius right into here and put 1 additional space there.
So is that convenient for the buildings you're proposing?
Well, it's 30 sites, 30 parking spaces total that we're looking for everything that's on the site. I really think that the spaces that are provided right in front of the buildings are all these buildings are ever going to need.
Oh, okay.
Hey, you're talking to the mic.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, I see what you're saying.
We're just trying to meet the language of bylaws that will comply. Practical level, the location of them is.
And will you leave that plan with us tonight?
Of course, yeah.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Take it off after.
Yeah, I haven't closed the public hearing yet, so yes.
This is like the chicken or the egg. If we had had a preliminary, if you had had a preliminary consultation, you'd have a better grip on what they're proposing, number one. Number two, it's being treated like a conceptual, and it's the final, so whatever you end up with, you're going to be stuck with. And number three, how can you define what you would like the site to be as developed if you don't know which one of those uses that is going to be done on that site and not the expression "and the like"? And the like could be a lot of things that are unknown. And I would not rely on the building department to control that. This is your board. It's your opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, I'm going to close, okay, I'm going to close the public hearing now. So how do you folks want to proceed? I agree with Suzanne. I think we do need to be much more specific.
Well, I think one of the concerns I would have about defining the proposed tenants is I would consider this like any retail space on North or South Main Street, in that the owner of the building can't predict necessarily from year to year what kind of tenant they'll have, whether it's going to be a gift card shop or pet supplies or anything else. So there's only so far you can go in limiting what uses this building might be used for, and we've already got that defined in our ordinances.
Well, and you could add to that the parking that the board has been discussing, whether it's finalized tonight or not, is all premised on business services. So if there's any question about a proposed tenant not meeting business services, at a minimum, it's going to come back to the planning board for a revision on parking. So it's not stuck with per se. What the board can't do is try and, I mean, I suppose you could. I wouldn't encourage the board to overinterpret what the definition does say.
The only other concern I would have, again, this unfortunately gets into the uses of the buildings, but several of the parking spaces are located in front of the, what I'll call the garage doors of the building. So that would, of course, inhibit getting things in and out of the garage space.
But that's kind of up to,
Yes.
open hours and
It's up to the
it's
tenant.
not our fault.
That's right.
Just a second. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned before, but you two are sitting to vote. You're welcome.
Thank you for clarifying that, Kathy.
I did a little head count.
Yeah, figured that.
Okay.
If I may just add to...
Well, we've closed the public hearing,
Okay, I'm sorry.
So
unless you want to ask him a question.
no, I'm fine.
Okay.
I would propose that we approve this application as amended by the plan that was marked up tonight.
Second.
I would suggest in those plans needed to be included in the final application.
Yes, I agree, yes.
And I would suggest we approve the use of the property for business services as set forth on the plans.
Isn't that specified by the zoning?
But it's what we're approving. We're approving the use for business services.
To be clear, we're looking for approval
Yeah,
for what the
right,
bylaw
right.
provides.
Okay, public hearing is closed.
I'm happy to incorporate Peter and Roger's amendments to my motion.
So it would be a motion to approve the plan as submitted with the plan as amended this evening for the additional parking spaces to be 30 spaces for business services, with the understanding that an updated plan will be included in the file and ultimately be that which is signed by the board.
That's correct.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, we already have a motion and a second on the floor. Roger, would you be more comfortable if we define this a little bit more? Like, say, no light construction and things like that?
Business services is business services.
Well, he said there'd be no outside storage, no storage of heavy equipment. So if you wanted to include that, we could.
Davis?
I delayed going through the recommended conditions because there was more of a discussion as the plan was going around, but I didn't hear in the motion any suggestion that those conditions be included.
I'll amend my motion to include the conditions that you described earlier. Julie, do you want to second that?
Sure, I will.
Which
And
conditions?
and you're
are-
adding to those,
Yeah, right, well, yeah, I thought.
adding to those, no outside storage and no heavy equipment.
Okay, any other? All right, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all right, thank you very much. Okay,
The amended? Roger that. Thank you.
discussion items. There's a Lakes Region Planning Commission commissioner term that is up that Tavis has filled previously, and it's time to reappoint that person. Tavis said that he's interested. It would be for a 4-year term.
I have a question related to this last case. Did we approve all the planner recommendations?
Yes. We did.
Oh.
We did, okay. I missed that they were all included.
Okay, Planning Commission.
Do we need a motion for that,
Yeah,
Kathy?
yes, we do. Yeah.
Didn't we do this last meeting?
That was for the
That was-
Transportation Advisory Committee. This
That
is
was
for
a
the whole
different,
board.
Different committee.
Different hat.
All right, I'll make a motion that we appoint Tavis Austin for a 4-year term to the Lakes Region Planning Commission as our commissioner.
Okay,
I'll
I'll second
second
that, yeah, okay, good.
I have one item, and that is in the second line, it says, to be the town representative. We actually have 2 representatives, so I would like that to be either to be a town representative or one of the town's representatives.
Got it.
I'll amend it. I'll amend my motion as Roger
Can we
described.
also put a date on that letter that says,
Yes, and the date of this letter is March 5th, 2024, today's date.
Yes, ultimately, the memo that you're looking at is just a memo to the selectman who would ultimately make the appointment. You're just making the recommendation of the appointment.
okay, next one, Planning Board
Do we have to
alternate.
vote?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next item is the Planning Board alternate. Julie's term is up, and so we need to reappoint her for, I believe it's a 2-year term.
Is it 3?
No, it's 3,
It's 3.
3 years, okay.
unfortunately, yeah.
All right. 3
I would like
years.
to propose that we appoint Julie Jacobs for a 3-year term as alternate to the
I'll
planning
second
board.
that.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tavis, update on 16 Libby.
Yeah, so
Libby Street.
the last update was that there was a pending ZBA matter regarding an appeal of the planning board decision that was dismissed by the zoning board at their last meeting, well, 2 meetings ago now. What we're still waiting on is the outcome of the Housing Appeals Board appeal, and I have not received any update since this agenda was put together. I don't know when that is going to be heard. Next steps that I'm aware of is that we'll be notified of the preliminary hearing, and then the ultimate hearing date will be set at that point, and then we will have an answer from the state.
Okay, and our attorney has all of the documentation that she needs?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. All right, on to other. Doug, did you want to make a statement?
Yeah, so the next topic is to review some of the issues that the planning board hopes to work on during this year and set the schedule for them. Before we get into that, I'd like to say that in response to several inquiries that were emailed to me, I'd like to clarify details about the planning board warrant articles on the March 12th ballot. The articles are spelled out for voters to review in the official ballot located in the town website, in the Granite State News, and available in hard copy at Town Hall and at the library. I'd urge voters to educate themselves rather than rely on social media posts or the grapevine. The 2 planning board warrant articles on the ballot were written to address 2 of last year's articles that were defeated. Citizens have had multiple opportunities over the past year to ask questions and weigh in on these issues. The topic of shorefront regulations has had at least 3 hearings in the past few months. So before anybody comes with a claim that we're putting all of last year's warrants on the article, please look at this year's articles yourself. Thank you.
Okay,
I guess I would like to suggest that basically one of those articles associated with the shoreline has been worked on by the Waters Committee at great length, and it is not something which the Planning Board necessarily was trying to say needs to be done. It is the group of people who are concerned about our waters trying to make it reasonably clear as to how things work and why it is done that way.
And the second warrant article is one that was submitted by petition, and we,
No, I'm not talking about that one.
Not talking about.
I'm sorry, the second
Yeah,
planning
okay.
board amendment, which would be Article 3, was submitted by petition, and we are obligated to put that on the warrant with our recommendation, and in this case, we didn't recommend it.
Okay, well, let's go through this list. We've already talked about it at 2 previous meetings. What we tried to do was add some dates as to when we're going to be dealing with these things. So the one thing that we forgot to add was the conservation subdivision. We've had a committee that's been working on this. We're going to have one more committee meeting, and then I think it'll probably be ready to come to the planning board for a discussion. So I don't know if we want to do that in March or April. And the dates that I'm talking about, these are all work session. So, but yeah, go ahead, Tavis.
My hope, forget hopes. I think April would be a more appropriate time frame, since
Okay.
the 19th is going to be more of a discussion on road construction. And my recollection is the next conservation subcommittee meeting
Is the 11th?
might be a little premature to pull the trigger for the 19th.
okay.
So
Okay. All right, so that will probably come to the planning board for their discussion only, not deciding anything, we're just discussing it. And that'll be in April.
April 16th is the work session.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then the other items we've talked about, road construction. We've seen some preliminary wording on this. We've asked Steve Randall to come and discuss more questions that we had, and so he's going to be coming on March 19th.
I need to confirm that. He was on vacation recently, so I need to touch base and confirm that 319 is still, that's the target, but.
Okay. Okay, the C2 zone, that, my thought was to just bring that ahead to a public hearing. We've already had several meetings on this in the past. It was voted down last year along with the other amendments, but it was kind of a housekeeping thing to me. We've already taken all of the uses from C2 and put them in other districts. And so now we just need to remove it from the zoning ordinance so people aren't saying, where is this C2 thing? So,
Well,
anyway.
the uses have moved to other zones, and the C2 zone physically does not exist.
Yeah.
So this is
right.
just an amendment to remove language that describes a district that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I'd also like to clarify that with the exception of this discussion on the C2 zone, all of these items listed in the bullet points for discussion, it doesn't mean that they're going to be warrant articles. It's just something we're going to discuss.
Right.
It may or may not turn into a warrant article, but it doesn't mean there's going to be a warrant article just because it's on this list.
Okay, the short-term rental committee, there's been a lot of interest in that. Doug and Roger and myself and Tavis have met to discuss a way forward. And so that's what we're doing right now. Is anybody, Roger or Doug, do you want to say anything on this? Okay, so this will be coming back to us, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
After today's brief discussion, I don't think there's anything prohibiting that from coming back on 416 as suggested here.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a productive meeting. I think we made some progress. We realize this is a topic that needs to be addressed, and we're trying to do that.
Okay, multifamily discussion. As Roger just mentioned, there was a petition article that came to the planning board about multifamily. That ordinance, we didn't feel as if we had enough information to deal with the petition, so we actually didn't make any recommendation for it. But what we would like to do is to have a discussion with any members of the public that want to discuss this item. So we set that for April 16th, and we'll mention that again as we go along. The affordable workforce inclusionary zoning. This is something that Tavis was going to put together for a discussion with us and see where that goes. And so we've got that on for May 21st. The ADU discussion, that came up in the last 2 times we've talked about this. I think there's a difference of opinion on this board. And so, again, we really need to have more of a discussion before we decide if we want to proceed or if we do not want to proceed with any amendments to the ADU. Impact fees, that's nothing really to do with any ordinance, except the planning board does need to look at the it's sort of treated like a site plan, that we'd like to take a look at that, make sure that it's being done fairly and equitably, and decide if we need to change anything. If we do, that would come forward as sort of a site plan. What would we call that, Tavis? It's not a site plan, but it's similar to a site plan review.
Well, functionally, it would be the board reviewing what's currently on the books for impact fees. I'll be trying to get some information to see if the selectmen would like to see more of a tax offset on the school credit towards or against the school tax credit from impact fees. The board could then discuss changing the fee schedule, et cetera. So it's not a site plan per se, but if there were changes to that schedule, the board would have to have a public hearing.
Right. If we get that far.
If we get that far. I do not want people to look at tonight's agenda and think that public hearing will be on June 18th. I think that's a much larger discussion.
Okay. Okay, the solar ordinance, we've been working with the Energy Committee on that. And I've talked to Nancy Hirschberg, and she thinks they'll be ready to come to the planning board for a discussion, and that would be in July. The water sewer issue, we've had discussions about this because we really can't move ahead with any issues about due to housing until we have the water sewer issues. So that is on Brad's shoulders at this point.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to, maybe put a date in here to to push it along. And I'm thinking maybe the June workshop date would be a good target to gather up whatever information we have available at the time anyway, to at least bring it forward and work from that.
Okay, all right, thank you. So June.
June 18th for the work session.
Tavis would like to see us take a look at the definition of duplex. And so we're going to discuss that in July. Did you want to say something about that, Tavis?
Not specifically. I think the board needs to look at a phrase that's currently in the ordinance called similar proportions. I think the ordinance would do better justice to the ordinance user if it explained what similar proportions meant, and the planning board can contemplate that. Many people look at it various different ways. It's a 50-50 between the two uses. It's a 60-40. Clearly, when you get to a 70-30, you're an ADU, but where, I guess most appropriately, where does the town believe similar proportion, what does that mean? So that's the discussion there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the master plan update, Peter Goodwin has been sort of leading that, and along with Linda Murray and myself. Linda and I have looked at it and have updated some items that we know have made some approval or aren't making improvements. So, and so we've just sort of updated. I think there were 8 items. Were there?
There were 7 or 9, and the one that was, I think, most significant was the fact that it was desired to have the Pop Whalen as a 4-season place, and it is now. And of course, 2 years ago, it was not dead in the water and nothing was happening with it. So it's quite a change from 2 years ago.
Yeah, so it's that type of thing that we've updated. But what we've decided is that we'll wait until 2025 and do a more complete update at that point. And that means getting in touch with the other boards and commissions and department heads and getting their input. So that's 2025. Okay, folks, what did I miss?
Well, the only thing I'd like to add is the plan to do the multifamily discussion in April may be informed by the result of this month's vote.
Okay. What do you mean?
Whether the petition warrant article is approved or not.
Okay.
That could certainly affect our multifamily discussion.
Yeah, okay, well, we still would probably need a discussion.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Okay, what did we miss here? Anybody have any thoughts?
I think we've been through the list a couple of times, and we got them all now.
Well,
It's plenty.
okay. All right, but other items may come up that we may have to think about adding.
It's fine.
Okay.
And I invite the public, whether they're watching on YouTube or not, to come to a meeting, and during the public comment session, you're of course welcome to make suggestions as to what the planning board should address.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Everybody's all set with that? Okay, public comment?
Good evening, Audrey Klein. I'm mostly here just to make some comments on the subcommittee group that's looking at the short-term rental issue, because I had some thoughts about it since after you spoke about it last time. First of all, do you all have the benefit of the spreadsheet that was done by the State Planning Commission on the towns that have regulations for short-term rentals? This is a spreadsheet as of, I think it's 2022. I don't think it's been updated. of towns that have either zoning or licensing or both. And it's just a really good shortcut. You can look at the town, and then you can go to the website and see what it says. So I made copies for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good, thanks. And Audrey, when did you say this, is this pretty up to date then?
It's up to date as of 2022, but I don't think they've put a couple of things from 23 on here, but I can't say that it's all the
Okay.
way up to date.
All right.
So I actually went in search of this because I was looking for how other towns dealt with the licensing versus the zoning, or a combination of each. I think the combination of the two is the gold standard because you can capture a lot of regulation with these two things because they cover different aspects. One of the differences that I see between the two is that, first of all, the BOS representative didn't have anything to say about whether the selectmen are likely to be interested in licensing. If they are, it's a pretty heavy lift because there's a lot of administrative work behind a licensing, especially when you're talking about potentially a couple of hundred places that are getting licensed as opposed to our 5 places downtown in our one licensing situation that Tavis brought to your attention, which is actually on the last page of this. The downtown vendors, hawkers and peddlers, I think the town manager's administrative assistant probably runs that program. It's probably pretty easy. If you have a couple of hundred different places getting licensed, it's a big program. You got to put some resources to that. Somebody's got to run it. It's not going to be the Planning and Development Office. It's not going to be the police department. Maybe it's going to be the fire department. Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's a really good question to put a lot of effort in without necessarily knowing whether it's actually doable from a licensing standpoint. I think licensing, again, the real benefit is you don't have to deal with the grandfathered issue. So I think it's a good idea to take a look at that, but I think that it's important that the pieces that are put together for that are also worded in a way that they can be in a zoning ordinance or made into a zoning ordinance, at least a very simple zoning ordinance, because I think you have to have pieces in each. If you're going to have licensing, you need to have some kind of piece in the zoning ordinance to go along with that. Otherwise, it's just going to be a huge program with calling out where they belong, how much is it going, are you going to charge for the licensing every year or every 2 years? Are they going to have inspections? What is the cost per unit for that? It would be a great program, but it's a lot of work. So I'm concerned that the Board of Selectmen is going to say that's a great idea, let's do it in 4 years, or not at all. And then the opportunity to put something into place in zoning, something simple, will have passed again for another year. So I just want you to think about how complicated that might get. Now with zoning, I understand that people are afraid that putting forward a simple simple zoning definition or something like that will prevent or not allow short-term rentals. And I don't know if there's some fear that the code enforcement officer is going to go running out looking for these places and enforcing them. That's not going to happen. That's not what that's not what happens when these come up. What'll happen is they'll get enforced as they land on the planning and zoning desk. Something happens, it lands on their desk. And in the meantime, it can be fleshed out over the course of a year or two, added to, subtracted from, tweaked, improved. Because the zoning ordinance is a living document, it's supposed to change as the experience of the ordinance changes. So for instance, the ADU ordinance that was put into place because the state required it, I think there was a fear that all of a sudden there was going to just be an explosion of ADUs. And so the regulations are really restrictive. And it started out that way. We found out that there was only a dozen in a few years. So it makes sense to loosen that regulation now that there's some experience behind it. That's how the zoning is supposed to work. The same thing can happen with the definition for short-term rentals. As I was thinking about this, I was listening to Paul O'Brien at the Candidates Forum, and it really struck me that he was talking about the decision-making process. And it's true that it's difficult for a good decision to come from a really poor decision-making process. If it does, it's called luck, right? Good decisions usually come from good decision-making processes. So I started thinking about the whole housing thing, and I was doodling, and I started doodling all the different housing areas, and then started to think about how interwoven they all are with each other. If you talk about manufactured housing, you can talk about that as a short-term rental. It could be a detached ADU. It could be a nonprofit affordable elderly housing unit. So these all kind of interweave. And so when you look at one thing, you need to be aware of everything else. So I doodled a little chart here. It might not be perfect, but it's pretty interesting, and I made copies for you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. I also had a lot of fun making these different bullets because I had to have different bullets for each thing. So you start looking at, say, a duplex structure, both units similar size. They can be in a part of inclusionary zoning. They can be short-term rental. They can be a workforce housing unit. It can be a single, no, it can't be a single family. That's a mistake. Or it can be a nonprofit affordable elderly housing. It's, they all mesh together in some of these discussions, and I don't think we really are recognizing that they are so intertwined or can be so intertwined. I think there was a comment made last time that, we have this nonprofit affordable workforce housing, but we don't have any provision for profit workforce housing. Well, we do. That's what the inclusionary zoning is. That's exactly what the inclusionary zoning is. That's set up there for people to do projects that are market rate with some amount of nonprofit. Some amount of affordable housing. That's all profit. That's all a profit project. About the only way they can do that now is to go with very, very small homes, tiny homes. Unless they do one of these big developments, kind of like Harriman Hill, but private. But that's very, very difficult to do. The ones that I'm familiar with in Dover, they have 600 square foot houses. They're one bedrooms. They're very close together. That's a for-profit workforce housing development. So I think if you look in that workforce housing, you can bring in tiny homes, you can bring in manufactured units if you'd like, you can bring in multifamily units. And if you look at that one section, you can tweak a lot of things to get the types of housing choices that you're hoping to expand on just in that section. You don't have to make a whole nother section for that. So this is a complicated, large subject, and I feel like I've only touched on a very small part of it. So that's all I wanted to say.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How are those small homes working in Dover?
How are they what?
How are they working? How are they working out?
It's working great. But they're a unicorn. You know what that is?
I've heard of them.
Yeah. So if you get somebody that can do that, that's a unicorn. That's like one unusual situation, right? We could change our ordinances a lot, and that person will never come. So there's reasons why they could do that. They're covering a lot of the soft costs with their own expertise. You know, the wife is an architect, the husband's a project manager and a developer. So they're essentially absorbing the project management fees as they're working up this, and they're building tiny houses for, you know, one person or a couple. And that's why they could do that.
How many of those do you get on an acre?
How many do they have on an acre?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. But Dover either changed their ordinance or, I mean, they're very close together. They're very close together.
When you say how close together, very close together, could you
20
estimate?
feet.
20 feet apart?
Yeah.
And they're probably no more than 20 feet wide, probably less than that.
No, they're 600 square feet.
Yeah.
They're small. They're a living area with a sleeping loft. So in that instance, they have, I don't know if there's 60 of them. So there's no families. You know, there's virtually no children. There might be a single parent with one child, but they probably don't live there for very long. They are single working people, largely. So if that's who you want to attract and you can build that type of development, then you can, you can be successful at that profit development.
Getting back to the STR spreadsheet that you provided, could you send that to the planning board in electronic form so we don't have to type in those long URLs?
How much is it worth to you? Yeah, of course I can. I Googled it and it popped up. It's from the Office of Planning and whatever they call it now on the state level. But yes, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Thank you.
Yep. I actually turned it into a Word because I added stuff from 2 towns that hadn't been on there.
Yeah, if you could just send the Word document,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
I can do that. Any other comments?
Thank you. This is very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thanks.
Well, that was interesting. Believe it or not, I haven't talked to Audrey
Suzanne.
about this. Suzanne Ryan. She took it from one perspective, which is almost like the end product. And Doug, to let you know, last year when you proposed zoning ordinances, we came in at the tail end. I'll speak for myself. And I asked, why hadn't you researched some data? not it's my opinion, but data. And so I'm here in the beginning of the project, you may or may not be proposing, hopefully fewer than more, data. I come back to that because as a board, and I was on a planning board for 30-something years, you just can't say, it's my opinion, it would be a good idea. You have to substantiate it to be able to sell it to the public. And so one of the things right off the bat is I don't want to be quoted on it, but I believe the state law says every year you're supposed to update your zoning map. Not necessarily the official zoning map, but the zoning map that's on the wall downtown, downstairs. I think that's like 17 or something like that. Use that, lay it out on the table. And then, Peter, you know the land use maps that we had, all the different kinds of topography and terrain, and they're excellent maps. Those maps, you should all have a copy of those maps. And you lay that out, and you overlay things, and you take what Audrey's saying about the zoning areas, and you kind of figure it out. But just as a quick thing I did before I came tonight, because I saw your list of items that you might be working on, I thought to myself, well, really, depending on your perspective, my perspective would be, we've been lucky. We haven't had a lot of subdivision. So I just grabbed the last 3-year town reports, and we've had 8 subdivisions with a total of 18 lots. We're lucky. And it isn't because we've zoned against it. It's because economics, there's a million reasons. But the question I would ask if I was sitting there is, how many vacant lots do we have that could be built upon? Go back to those land use maps. They'll be helpful to show you what parcels could be developed. The other thing is we've had 13 boundary lines. Boundary lines for what? Did they consolidate to expand their property or build a bigger house or put an addition? I would be interested to know a little more about that. And we've had lot merges. Again, what was the results of those over a period of years? For what purpose did it serve? And I understand people are perfectly allowed to do it and welcomed in a lot of cases to merge. For special use permits, we've had 8 in 3 years. For site plan reviews, we've had 21, and that would be commercial, not residential. And commercial seems to be kind of healthy. It seems to be growing. Accessory dwelling units in 3 years. Of course, you could do 10 years. I just did this quickly. We've had 7. The ordinances are there to do it, although that one really needs a lot of work. And then we've had building permits for commercial, 26. But the one that's interesting to me is we've had approximately in 3 years, 3,000 building permits. Building permits in what categories? There'd be a breakdown on that, would be interesting. People expanding their houses, or they're just putting on decks, or adding garages that may become in-law apartment. By the way, whatever happened to that word in-law apartment? In-law apartments are now our accessory dwelling units. So when we look at accessory dwelling unit ordinance, let's just think about in-law apartment, because that's all we did is change the title, and maybe the definition didn't keep up with that. So in summary, that's just a little off the top of my head. I think Audrey did a nice job. That was a lot of work, what she did, and it's very useful. But I really hope you really dig into the foundation of why you make a zoning change. And as I say, when I was on the planning board, I can't recall that many zoning proposal changes. Once we got that master plan in place, we had a good roadmap, and it didn't require a lot of change. Although I will say, living in Rockingham County, we got hit pretty bad for growth, but we were prepared. So thank you, and I hope you guys all do some digging and homework.
Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne, I have a question for you.
And did you want to say?
Are you proposing that I allow my in-laws to move in with me? Are you proposing I allow my in-laws to move in with me? Are you proposing I allow my in-laws to move in with me?
Of course, then again, it might not.
Okay. Okay, on to the minutes. February 13th. Roger, do you have any corrections?
On the, on page 4, under the Lakes Region Planning Commission, it says Tavis reviewed the commission appointment dates of May 2026 and his own 2026. Is that right for you, Tavis?
No, that would be 2024.
And then on page 6, maybe 2/3 of the way down, it says Tavis stated the town manager will review a draft short-term licensing document noting surrounding towns their success with licensing program versus a zoning change. Is that
Well, that's not
accurate?
quite what was said. What was said was a rough draft had been put together and submitted for consideration, and then this board went on to create a subcommittee.
That's all I had, and I think we're really indebted to Michaela Beckwith for the quality of these minutes. The town, I know, has had trouble finding people to take minutes. I looked back through some old minutes and was kind of surprised by how bad they were. And hers, I think, have been quite good, and I think we're fortunate to have her.
I agree.
Motion on 213?
I'll make a motion to approve. As amended?
Okay, second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
One abstention.
And one abstention.
I wasn't
Okay.
present.
Okay. Okay, next one. Lost my agenda again. Anyway, the next set of minutes.
So for the February 20th minutes,
Yeah.
again, complimenting Michaela Beckwith's quality of her work, I only have one very minor change. On the third page, the third sentence from the top, change effecting to affecting.
Anyone else have anything?
Yes, on page 1, under Brad's comments, the fourth bullet down, page 3, section 312, at the end of that, it says approved by the Town Board of Selectmen of Department of Public Works. Brad, do you have any clarification for what you said? Because I don't
Gonna
think
test
that's
my
what you
memory,
said.
aren't you?
I think it just needs to say "and."
Yeah, I think I agree. It should change of to and between selectmen and
Or
department.
in consultation with, or whatever.
Yeah, it should be by the Board of Selectmen and the Department of Public Works.
Okay.
I believe is how I'd said it.
Thank you.
Then on page 2, third paragraph, It's Chester Chelman, Chelman, and he's the former owner of White Mountain Survey. He never worked for Horizons.
Right.
He's the one who Jim Ryan's got White Mountain from.
Well, while that might be factually accurate, I don't think that's what Vaughn said. Certainly you can correct the spelling, but if she said a retired Horizons engineer, that's what she said, whether it's accurate or not.
Yeah. And then under my comments, first bullet, it should be figures 1, 2, and 3 are missing and should be in there. Next one, page 7 and 8, it's reversed. It should be changed addition to edition.
Just as a brief follow-up to that, those figures cannot be found anywhere. But addition was changed to addition.
And I guess on page 5, the last line under accessory dwelling units, while the board agreed ADU is worth further discussion, I did not. Would you like another motion?
Yep.
I make a motion we approve the February 20th minutes as amended.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and one item, I didn't do the findings of fact for the 18 Pine Hill Road. It's a transitionary zoning district, which means it's residence to business. It meets the setback and the lot coverage. The parking requirements will be satisfied once the revisions are made. Let's see. No heavy equipment was added in order to be sure that it did meet the business service requirement. And it meets the height requirement. Is that okay, Tavis?
Hmm?
Okay. All right. Anybody have anything else?
I just have one thing, and that is on the lifetime application. Have we heard anything from Mr. Brem? That was, the special use permit was continued until the 19th, and I believe he waived, what I now realize is a 65-day window to approve, not...
He waived that. I have been in touch with him. He has not made a final decision as to whether he will be here on the 19th or not, and he has not indicated if he will or will not resubmit for site plan. To answer a question that came up earlier about the Dover project, the Dover project is building 44 tiny homes across 4 acres, so 11 units per acre. If you put in Dover tiny home project, you will find all the data you're looking for, including the plan, layout, etc. And they are tiny homes.
600 square feet.
Is that it?
That's it for that,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, folks.